Hello bookworms, welcome back to my channel and to another review. Today I will be talking about The Rook by Daniel O'Malley, one of those books that I had just laying around forever and only recently got into actually reading it and reviewing it. And this video is going to be very long, so grab some popcorn or something. So let's get into it, starting with the plot. The Rook starts in the middle of the action, well, actually in the aftermath of the action, because we start out with our protagonist, a young woman who finds herself in a pouring rain in the middle of a park in London, surrounded by dead bodies, as you do, and she has absolutely no memory whatsoever. She has no idea who she is, what's going on, who are these dead people, how she got into the situation, nothing. But luckily, she soon finds in her coat pocket a letter which tells her that she actually knew that this was about to happen. So in advance, she wrote to her future memory-less self. And basically this letter leads to tons and tons and tons of other letters explaining everything. And apparently, and this is the basic, I'm not spoiling anything, this is what you need to know what this book is about and to understand this review, okay? So apparently our protagonist is a member of a secret organization composed of people with supernatural powers, and they save the world from supernatural threats. And apparently one of her colleagues betrayed her, attacked her, and made her lose her memory. So now she has to go back to work, pretend everything is fine, she still has her memory, try to find out who betrayed her and hopefully why, and stop him or her, and also save the world, because that's kind of what she does. So easy peasy. Okay guys, let's face it, you probably guessed that this is going to be a rant video. Usually the longer videos are rant videos. But I do want to say, and this is the first thing I want to say regarding my opinion about this book, that this is not a terrible book whatsoever. I actually kind of enjoyed it. I enjoyed certain parts of it. The problem is that it's one of those cases where you have a really, really good idea. However, the writing itself could use a little bit of editing, or a lot of editing, actually. I reached the conclusion that in order to actually enjoy this book, and as I said, this book can be very enjoyable, is not to take it seriously, something that took me a while to understand myself. You see, you start at the beginning, you think that you're going to get like a Born Identity type of a story, where in fact what you're actually getting is more like Men in Black, just less funny and good, and it doesn't have Vincent D'Onofrio. So let's just jump into this review, and I will share with you what the problems in this book were. And boy, do I have a lot to say. I don't think I've ever reviewed a book where I had so many different notes about it. So I will try to condense them into categories, but again, this is going to be a long video, so bear with me. This is also why I'm speaking so fast. So as for positives, I do like to start with positives. I think I already said it. I think that the idea is very cool, and also, as I mentioned before, we jump right into the action. For the most part, the book was a pretty fast-paced read. For the most part. But I'll get into it. Let's start though with characters, and most specifically the protagonist. And I realized that I didn't tell you her name yet. That's because I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it. It's Welsh. I'm sorry, I'm not Welsh. I'm not even British. So it's Welsh, and she says it rhymes with Tiffany, so I can only assume her name is Miffany? They are making a series of this book. I think it is a Netflix series, and I have no interest whatsoever in watching the series. However, I do want to watch it just to understand how to pronounce her name. But I'll just call her Miff. So Miff was a very antagonizing and overall very annoying protagonist. She's one of those people who think that they are really cool and very witty, but aren't. She's also extremely judgmental about everyone else in the book. Every single person who is good in computer is, in her words, a nerd, which is very rich for a person who described herself as a glorified pencil pusher. And I got the feeling that every character that has a very unique superpower is a freak in her eyes, even though, as far as I remember, this word is never used in this book. I still got the feeling that she was very condescending about these people, which is very rich coming from a person who has supernatural powers herself. But the worst part is that Myth has some of the worst, most disgusting and toxic female stereotypes. And to remind you, the author, Daniel O'Malley, is a man, which somewhat bothers me even more. You see, I already told you that she's very judgmental and she judges both men and women, and it seems like the most important thing for her is how attractive people are. First off, whenever a handsome man comes along, she's so aghast, and she seems to not be able to concentrate on anything other than just how hot this man is. And there are some really mean, bad, evil people in this book, but you get the feeling that this person, this man, could be the next Adolf Hitler, but as long as he's hot, he's not so bad. And when it comes to women, I was even more disgusted, and that's including the way Myth refers to herself. The first time that she's in a safe place after losing her memory, she looks at a mirror to kind of check herself out and see how she looks like, something that I'm pretty sure every person will do. But it seems like, again, the most important thing is whether she's hot or not, and she seems to be really disappointed from the fact that she has small boobs and she's not very attractive. And then there are, of course, the other women in the book, that some of them are really good looking, and of course, again, Myth is being really judgmental, but this time it's a very mean, jealous way. There is this one colleague who is, of course, very tall with slim legs and looks really good, and one time Myth meets her and she gains some weight and she is so happy about it. The only thing that makes her happier is when another colleague noticed that this woman gained some weight. And then there is another colleague that Myth meets for the first time, and of course she is as well model material, and Myth actually wishes that this woman had slept her way to the top, because otherwise that will mean that she's both gorgeous and capable. Like, I'm sorry, but that was just disgusting. And this really, really upsets me, because these things have actually real world consequences. Now, I know that some of you will disagree with my next point and say that I'm just overreacting, and quite frankly, I would like to hear your opinion about it in the comment section. So make sure to, voice your opinions. But the thing is that there are some men out there in the real world, outside of book world, that really do believe that all women are like that. This really ugly feminine stereotype that women cannot be trusted, that they will be distracted by handsome men and will not be able to work with other women because they're always jealous and will just stab each other in the back, that women are liars. And I bet you've heard these things before. Now, the thing is that these men get their ideas somewhere. And you may think, okay, well, this book is just a silly book with a bad protagonist. Not all female protagonist has to be the perfect example of feminism. And you're absolutely right. Not every character should represent greatly a group that he or she are in. But when a man writes a character like that, that's not just not very feminist or something. It holds all those really ugly stereotypes. I can't help but thinking that this specific author has a very stereotypical view of women, which is first off upsetting, but secondly, again, this has real world consequences. I met men who really think that way, and a lot of these men are not just some sort of, hillbilly trailer trash in the middle of nowhere. Some of them are considered very intelligent, they're successful, they're powerful. And when you have a powerful man who think this way about women, this gives him a great opportunity not to hire and not to promote women, because women cannot be in places of authority. They're flaky, they cannot be trusted, they're all the things I've already said. And again, I can only assume that some of you are thinking that I'm overreacting. And no, I am by no means saying that this book creates misogyny or that this book will make men abuse women. I'm just saying that this book is another example of a toxic culture that already exists. This book adds more fuel to a fire already existing and less thought on the subject. If you really think that I'm overreacting, just think about incels. They do get their poisonous ideas somewhere, right? Okay, I want to move on because this is a big subject and, you know, you can talk about the effect of men writing very misogynistic female characters and everything. You can talk about it for hours, but this video is long enough and I've said all I have to say in this context. Again, if you have anything to add, to agree, to disagree, write it in the comment section. I would love to hear your opinion. Now, let's move on. But we're still on the subject of characters. Now, before I go back to myth, I do want to point out that there are actually other characters in the book, surprisingly, but I don't want to talk about them too much because, quite frankly, they're boring. Which is another problem with the story. He focuses a lot on myth, but all the other characters, some of them have potential to be interesting characters, but for the most part, they are just dancing around her. A lot of them are very stereotypical, so really not a lot to say. However, I talked on one side about the protagonist, now we have another very important counter character, the antagonist, the villain. So we do have this traitor that only in the end of the book we find out exactly who they are. And quite frankly, that was also very uninteresting. There weren't any clues or hints, there was just nothing. It could have been just any other character as the traitor. But we do find out somewhere around the book that there is another rival organization, an evil organization, and the members of it are also the villains. By the way, this organization is an ancient Belgian organization that have been existing approximately since the 17th century. And interesting fact, Belgium didn't exist in the 17th century. In fact, Belgium didn't exist until the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken. So do some research before you write things and publish them, okay? But you know what? Let's just ignore that. Let's say that it was on purpose, actually. It's not Belgium. Belgium is the place that we know today as Belgium. It's for convenience sake. Great, now I smeared my makeup. Anyway, historical accuracies aside, as a villain, this organization or the people behind this organization were not very good, not very effective. Villains can either make or break a book, but you need to understand why they are villains. Now, this organization, why are they evil, you ask? Were they after world domination? Were they after money, power, and influence? Did they seek revenge on a certain group? Did they think in their eyes that they were doing the right thing, like Magneto? No idea. Honestly, I had no idea what exactly these people want or even why in the first place they were in a certain rivalry against the Czechie, which is like Myth's organization. No idea. So, okay, we're still in the subject of characters. Hey, I said that this video is going to be long, right? So we have a very antagonizing protagonist. We have villains who I have no idea what exactly they're after. We have a bunch of other characters that, you know, they're just there. What else can I say about characters? Well, the last thing that I want to say in this subject, and I'm going back to myth, is something that could have been a saving grace. Character development, right? That's an important thing. But as you can imagine, it's not going to be any positive point. Actually, in fact, this is so weird. This book has the strangest, not existing character development I've ever read. And you probably are wondering, what? You see, it all comes down to the really bizarre fact that everyone from Myth to other characters who later discovered that she actually lost all of her memories, constantly and only referring to pro-amnesia Myth and post-amnesia Myth as two separate human beings, like they're not even the same person, which is just so fucking odd. I will be saying the word weird and other synonym of weird a lot in this video. You may or may not want to do a drinking game. Myth, and I mean new myth, post-amnesia myth, never ever refers to old myth in first person. She never thinks about her even as herself. She never says anything like, this is where I used to live, or I wonder what kind of a person I used to be. She always referred to Myth, the third person, as Thomas, which is her last name, and even Myth herself, like old Myth, says stuff like, you have inherited this body, so much so that at the beginning it took me a while to understand that we are actually talking about a woman who lost her memory. I actually thought at the beginning that we're talking about some sort of a body swap or something. Now, I do have a few issues with that. Number one, it is fucking weird. I mean, I get that your memories and your experience make you who you are, but even if you lose them, you're basically the same person, right? Your brain is wired the same way, isn't it? I mean, I'm not a neurologist or psychologist or anything ending with an ist, but I think it kind of makes sense, isn't it? No? Am I going insane because of this book? So yeah, the first issue is that it's weird, doesn't make sense. Like, I get that in a certain way she doesn't really feel like it's herself because she doesn't remember doing all these things, buying the house and choosing, I don't know, to buy these clothes and stuff. But this is the only way that old myth and new myth are described. Second issue, this is kind of stupid because for most of the book, if you remember, new myth has to pretend that she is actually old myth, that she didn't lose her memory. And myth herself, old myth, sorry for the confusion, she says herself in the letters that she is a very shy, like so shy it's crippling kind of a person. She's very meek, she doesn't have any actual authority, that she jumps from every little noise. But new myth, however, is automatically a kick-ass. She is tough, she knows exactly what to do, which is even more impressive considering that she doesn't actually know what's going on because it's actually like her first day on the job, really. But she does stuff, she initiates, her voice oozes authority. You're trying to pretend that you're a certain person, that you know exactly what sort of personality they have. Can't you at least try to pretend that you're shy or a scaredy cat? This is just stupid. And number three, remember we are on the subject of character development. And there isn't any. Look, if you're constantly referring to the old version of a person and a new version of a person as two completely different people, this is not character development. This is cheating! It's like, ooh, look, in the first Harry Potter book, Ron was really clueless, but by the 7th book, Hermione was really a kick-ass super witch. Look what a great character development! Like, I'm trying to figure this out. Was he intending to do a character development thing to turn one person from being really kind of shy and really like a scaredy cat and everything to a really strong woman, but then he forgot that he portrayed them as two completely different people? Like, what the hell is going on here? Editing! Editing! This book needed another person to just read it and say, okay, what's going on here? It doesn't make sense. Daniel, please change it or explain it. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. What else can I talk about? My notes are here in case you're wondering. Let's move on from the characters to an element of the storytelling, aka Myth's letters. As I mentioned at the beginning, I know it was a long time ago, but if you remember at the beginning I said that Myth kind of prepared everything and wrote letters on letters on letters, like tons of letters, including a folder, but I will call it a letter because we need one word for everything. Anyway, she wrote everything that she feels relevant for another person to understand her and the job and, you know, everything needed in order to impersonate her, pretty much. Now, imagine, if you will, your job is to save the world, you have a pretty complicated life, and you find out that in less than 3 months, if I'm not mistaken, she found out that it will be in less than 3 months. So you find out that in less than 3 months, you will be betrayed, attacked, and will lose all your memory, and you need to be able to understand what's going on. What do? Well, you start writing all the basics. And may I remind you that old Myth, she is the perfect office person. She is very organized. She's really good in that sort of thing. Now, why am I even mentioning all this? Because Myth's letters are composed of huge info dump, that a lot of that we don't need, things that could have been in a novel, including descriptions and dialogues, and diary entries. Basically, and this is something that a lot of people agree on in Goodreads and such, the letters were too much. They appear throughout the entire book, and I get that the point was to kind of show a little bit of old Myth and to give us information, but first off, there are better ways to give information. Show, don't tell is a rule that Daniel O'Malley need to learn. And secondly, they're too much, they're distracting, and gives us so much information that like half of it we don't really need. For example, we do get a short biography of, I think, 3 people that Myth work with. First off, again, if you want to tell us about a person, show them, show how they behave. Don't just tell us everything. And second, these biographies are so long for just like the small part that they actually play in the book. Like there's so much information there about their childhood and their own parents, and I was certain that this information is going to be useful at some point. It doesn't. And also there are parts where, for example, Myth enters work and then it will cut to a letter from old Myth telling exactly what sort of codes to put in order to open doors and how to go through security and stuff like that. How about instead of that, instead of distracting us from the story, you just have new Myth going to work, punching in the right codes, going through security, and then in like a sentence just telling us that she knows all of this because she read it in a letter. This will still make the letters relevant without just adding stupid filler. So yeah, for the most part, these letters were just a huge info dump, but there is another problem. In the world of the story, that doesn't really make sense. Again, imagine that. You find out that pretty soon, and like less than 3 months, can theoretically also be tomorrow, right? So in a short time, you don't know when you're going to lose all your memory, and you need to leave instructions to like how to be you. You're writing the basic stuff, you're writing the important stuff. So why does old Myth start writing things as if she's writing a novel, telling about events that happened and how her day was and about her feelings and stuff like that? Like, it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to us, the readers, because we get to learn a little bit about Myth, we get to learn a little bit about some other characters that are mentioned, and of course there is this one scene that she described that had nothing to do with the present, but later we find out that it's actually important. That doesn't make sense story-wise. That's a lazy way to convey information. No, I'm sorry. Editing, again, there must have been a better way to convey this information instead of constantly going and cutting away from the main storyline to give us a diary entry. Sorry, that didn't work. Okay, what else can I talk about? Let's talk about, and we're almost there, don't worry. Good for you for staying with me. I'm like, you can't see it on a camera, but I'm like sweating because it's really hot outside, and you know, when I'm filming I have to close all the doors and the windows, and I can't put a fan on because it will make noise. So let's talk about the tone of the book. What was the tone of the book? I'm not sure exactly which is the problem. This is also why it took me so long to understand that you should not take this book so seriously. I think that the author, similarly to Miff's character, also believes that he is a lot smarter and wittier than he actually is. The problem is, and in order to explain it, I will again refer you to Men in Black, the movie that I kind of compared this book to at the beginning. Men in Black is, in my opinion, a great movie. It's a lot of fun, it's funny, it has a very interesting take, a unique take on the whole alien invasion thing, and it works. You know why? Because the tone is consistent. The movie is an action movie, a science fiction movie, but it's also a comedy. Now, in a comedy, it's always a little bit difficult to also convey emotion, to make you care about things, because everything is not being taken too seriously. But in Men in Black, for example, we have Will Smith, who's a kind of a wise guy, he's cracking jokes, but then we have Tommy Lee Jones, who really balanced him nicely as like the straight man. We do have an alien invasion. We're kind of worried, but we know things are going to be okay because these aliens are very menacing, but they look like cockroaches and they take over the body of this redneck farmer. So in other words, it works. However, imagine taking Will Smith's character from Men in Black and putting him in a James Bond movie. It won't work, right? It will be weird because Will Smith is cracking jokes all the time. He doesn't take anything seriously, while the James Bond movies are kind of more serious, you know, to some extent. I mean, how seriously can you take a movie that has a character called Pussy Galore? But Will Smith in a James Bond movie is kind of the way that I felt about The Rook, because you do have serious things going on, and I think the author wanted us to take everything a little serious, like there is this evil Belgium organization that want to do bad things, not exactly sure what, but bad things regardless. But then Miffany, in the face of such danger, start cracking jokes, and not even funny ones, like she's no Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It was so difficult to take the serious situation seriously because Miff wasn't, so why should I? But still, we should kind of care, and other things seems to be serious, but then when things become really serious, then they're also not, because you got a main character who keeps cracking unfunny jokes, which is stupid. There's also a part, actually there are two parts in the book where really terrible things happen, like seriously a disaster, people die, cool people, I mean it is the Rook, so people with the potential of being cool die, characters that I kind of liked, and I didn't feel anything. I don't think I've ever in my entire life read such an emotionally dead scene, especially a death scene. In fact, I think it's kind of impressive that he managed to do that. Still doesn't mean it's any good. Like, really, the reason that I actually knew that this character died is that in the aftermath, they just kind of mentioned a sentence about how he was lying in a pool of his own blood or something like that. What's for lunch? Okay, guys, we're getting to the end. Can you see the sweat on my face? Fuck, it's hot here. So there is this last thing that I want to talk about, and I saved it for last because I find it a very odd subject, but I have to say it because it jumped out of pretty much every 5 pages or something like that. And let's call this subject focus, because the things that the author chooses to focus on baffled me. Like, there are a lot of things in this book that raise questions. For example, like some of the people's supernatural powers are not exactly clear. What I said about the villains, you know, what exactly do they want? Why did they become from regular people to villains? Things like that. They raise more questions that unfortunately I didn't get any answers to. However, the author, on the other hand, chooses to focus on really odd things, especially, and we're not kidding, interior decor. And if you read the book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, there is describing a new room in order for us to understand where we are. After all, it is a book, it's not a movie. We need to know where things are, how things look like. But there is that, and there is describing and commenting, of course, because it's Smith, on every piece of furniture and knowing all of the decor in the room, including knowing exactly how shaggy the rug is in every room that Myth enters in the entire book. This is just odd. This is so weird. Like, maybe he thought that because he tells a story from a woman's perspective, women know more about the core, or maybe notice it more. But again, it's Smith we're talking about, so it's not just describing all the chairs and the sofas and the rug. Apparently rugs are very important. It's also commenting on them and criticizing them, and we know exactly if the person who is in charge of the decor has good taste or not. There is one part that would just, it's again going back to the whole problem with the tone issue. They catch a villain, and the main point here is that they have this villain, now they can interrogate them. And where do they catch him? In a B&B. Okay, but no, in the book it's a darling little B&B, and like the fact that the B&B was really kind of cutesy was apparently very important to the book. This was ridiculous. Like, I hope, and it just occurred to me that maybe it was on purpose. Maybe it was a little bit of a joke on the English. Whatever, I don't know. It was just, the author has a strange obsession with interior decor. So there you have it. And I think that I will also end this video because I said a lot. I said my opinion about it. I described in great detail a lot of the problem that I have with it. And by the way, if you would have given me another hour, I could have talked more. However, having said that, I know it's a little strange to say it, but I didn't hate the book. As I said at the beginning, I think the problem here is lack of editing and writing that is, let's call it subpar, but the author did have a really cool idea. The book has a lot of potential. The protagonist, the other characters, the Checky, you know, this organization, the villains, everything has great potential. It just, in my opinion, needed some more work. And with this, bookworms, I am ending this video and this review. Thank you very much for bearing with me. I know this video was long, but hopefully it was also entertaining. Please comment down below about your opinions. First of all, on the book, if you read it or if you maybe seen the series. And of course, about the whole misogynism, feminist, blah, blah things that I said at the beginning. I would like to hear your opinion. Again, guys, thank you for watching. If you did like this video, if you survived until now, don't forget to click like to show your support and to subscribe to my channel if you dare. Usually my videos are a lot shorter. I do have an entire playlist dedicated to my rant videos if it's something that you like. I don't know about you, but I love seeing people rant about like bad books or bad movies. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.